All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the CAPAL's Washington Leadership Program for tonight. I'm Denise Liu. I'm a semi-retired, but I am a board member for CAPAL and still work part-time as a executive coach for the Veterans Affairs Hospitals. And I'm happy to be here tonight as your facilitator for this evening's program. At CAPAL, we cultivate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander public service leaders by providing formative professional experiences and growth opportunities. This includes our annual public service scholarship and internship program, a roundtable series, mentorship program, and tonight's Washington Leadership Program. And this is the second of 6 sessions that we're holding this summer. The 2024 Washington Leadership Program is pulled together by a group of our alumni, scholar, and interns. So thank you to them for pulling together the topics and the panel members. So for tonight's session, we're excited to welcome Caitlin Balagula, Mitch Heidenreich, and Elaine Zhang for our panel discussion today. And tonight's discussion is on food security, agriculture, and the environment, where we'll discuss topics such as its sustainability initiatives, particularly in the agricultural field, and how it pertains to AANHPI, food security and sovereignty. There will be an audience survey following the panel discussion, and panelists will respond to audience Q&A at the end. We also invite attendees to stay after the session for our networking session as well. We encourage you to follow and join our conversation brought on tonight on social media with the hashtag #WeAreCAPAL. Thank you to our speakers and panelists this evening for spending the time with us, and also to all of you for joining us this evening. A very special thank you to our 2024 sponsor, the DC Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs, MAPIA, for making programs like tonight's possible for CAPAL. Thank you to our speakers and panelists for this evening for spending their time with us, and all of you. In addition, we'd like to give a warm thank you and shout out to USDA especially for making tonight's session possible, providing this wonderful venue, and a special thank you to Lian Hui and all of the staff at USDA for partnering and organizing this event. We want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank USDA for a long-standing partnership with CAPAL over the past 35 years. With the invaluable support of the USDA, CAPAL has been able to provide numerous internship and scholarship opportunities to AANHPI youth, with over 197 CAPAL scholars and interns over these years. AANHPI youth, in partnership with the USDA, has been able to extend career resources and cultivate invaluable support in a network in empowering our next generation of AANHPI leaders in public service. As CAPAL enters its 35th year as an organization, we look forward to the next chapter and exciting opportunities to welcome in conjunction with the USDA as we work together toward creating a strong public service pipeline for our future leaders. Before we kick off tonight's panel discussion, I'm thrilled to announce 2 speakers from USDA to deliver opening remarks for tonight's session. Please join me in giving a warm welcome first to Ms. Kenya Nicholas, Deputy Director of the Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement here at the USDA.
Good afternoon, future leaders. Or evening now, right? We've had dinner. It was delicious. Compliments to the chef. Again, my name is Kenya Nicholas. I serve as the Deputy Director for the Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement. And I'm just thrilled to be here with you all tonight for your second session of the 2024 Washington Leaders Program. Congratulations, because that alone tells me that I'm with a wonderful, esteemed group of people tonight that got me here after hours. It's my pleasure to be here. Our partnership with CAPAL is part of USDA mission to serve all Americans, providing effective, innovative, science-based public policy, leadership in agriculture, food and nutrition, and natural resource protections and management. I'm happy to say that we are the largest federal partner this year. So give a round of applause for all of the hard work that went into that. Again, we are very excited to work with our CAPAL partners, and we welcome this year's students, our interns, and young professionals that are interested in public service, and also the issues that surround food security. Not to mention agriculture and environment, which is going to be the topic of tonight's session. Here in the Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement, we like to call ourselves the front door to USDA because we have over 200 programs. And I can test anyone in here that works at USDA. Do you know all 200 programs? Even the secretary might say no. So for you all that don't know, his office is right there. Knowing him, he's probably still hard at work. But here in OPPE, our mission is to develop these partnerships, such as the one we have with CAPAL, to find solutions to some of the challenges that are faced in our underserved communities. Then we connect those resources to those communities. A lot of people in our underserved communities have no idea the plethora of programs that we have at USDA that can address some of their community needs. So we want you to go back and tell them some of the cool things that could assist in those areas. Our work also support the students from our AANHPI, which is our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander serving institutions, where many of them are first generation students, low income students, and all of them want to pursue a higher education. And we can assist with that. We give you work experience so that you can couple that with your education, and that would make you a much more marketable employee. Hint, hint. I'd like to point out two of our staff members here today that are dedicated to serving and connecting students and young adults to USDA's public service opportunities. One, I'm going to start with Lindsay. Where are you, Lindsay? Okay, Lindsay, give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. She is our youth coordinator and has only been on the job now a little shy of 1 year. So she has done some amazing things, including making sure that we foster and renew this contract and partnership that we have here with CAPAL. And she's also overseeing our youth programs, goals in the K through 12 space, and initiatives that are designed to help guide our youth in the decisions that they're going to make in public service careers. She also assists with our education programs. We want to have a pipeline of students ready to enter agriculture. So you can't wait until they get to high school and say, hey, come to agriculture, because they're like, what? I don't want to work with dirt. And of course we know it's not dirt, it's soil, but we want to bring the sexy back to agriculture. So Lindsay is working in that K through 12 space so that they're educated at a young age and knows that it's not just about soil and crops. Nowadays we're talking drones. So that's exciting. So again, thank you and welcome again, Lindsay. Hopefully you'll have a good first anniversary. And the next person is Lehan. Lehan is our AANHPI program coordinator. Give her a round. She is our coordinator for our AANHPI, and she also develops those partnerships that are needed to foster the relationships in those partnerships in the AANHPI communities. She also supports the White House Initiative on Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders Initiative. And part of that commitment, we recently sent her to Pacific Islands to build partnerships in areas that USDA just have not visited in the past. And she met with universities, partnerships, and even some of our stakeholders. So please, before you leave today, connect with these two ladies and they can support the work that you are already doing in public service. Use them as connector to these, use them as connectors to USDA's programs and services. Their information should be on the screen. I can't see it, but all right on cue. Okay, in closing, I did want to give a special shout out to Miss Susie Daubert. Oh, there she is. She's our NRCS representative that came to be here with us tonight. Thank you so much, Susie. She's with our Natural Resource Conservation Service. So thank you for your partnership. So in closing, I'd like to emphasize again, USDA's commitment to making sure that we have equality and reduce the barriers that are being faced in our underserved communities. And I mean that from the heart. The secretary does the same. He means it from his heart when you hear him speak. And I heard that from one of our interns. And can we just get our interns to just stand real quick? This is our future leaders as well. Yes, thank you so much. And many of them have come here today to just make sure this event goes well. So with that, I would like to take this time to introduce, I'm so honored, our USDA Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics, Ms. Sanah Baig. She has served USDA across 2 presidential administrations. And I remember her when she just got here from the first time. So it's so good to see you. You never know who's going to be your boss. She was appointed by President Biden to serve as the Deputy Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics in November of 2022. In her role as Deputy Undersecretary, Sanah leads the management of more than $4 billion in USDA science enterprises responsible for ensuring U.S. agriculture's success through the advancement in science, technology, and innovation. Under Sanah's leadership, RE is what we call it today. REE is the acronym, is focused on increasing research and extension support for underserved communities and strengthening those partnerships with our minority serving institutions, thereby advancing precision nutrition research in support of more equitable health outcomes and positioning agricultural transformation as a fundamental solution to fighting the climate crisis. Prior to her role, she served 1.5 years as the REE Chief of Staff. Before returning to federal service in 2021, she served 3 years as the Chief of Staff for the global nonprofit, the Good Food Institute. She also served as Program Director for the National Association of Counties in Washington, D.C. Ms. Baig worked for USDA for 6 years during the Obama administration in a variety of capacities, including serving as an advisor for the Office of the Secretary. Also in rural development, and she also worked in marketing and regulatory programs. She started her federal career at the ARS, the Agricultural Research Service, and the National Relations Board after working at the Northern Virginia Community College Woodbridge campus. She is a proud DC resident and graduate of the University of Virginia. I'm proud to welcome you tonight, Deputy Undersecretary Sanah Baig.
Hi, good evening. How are y'all doing? Good. I always wanted to jump up on the stage and I never get to do that because, you know, we have to be careful and follow the rules, but I had my Toms on, so I thought it could be safe. And since we're after hours, right, we can be a little flexible. Welcome. I am so happy to be with you all. I've actually had a chance to attend CAPAL events in the past, including one of your galas. And so I know the power of this organization, and I know the power of all of you. So really, it's a pleasure for me on behalf of United States Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and our whole leadership team to welcome you here to the U.S. Department of Agriculture headquarters on the National Mall. We also refer to this building in our department as the People's Department. So you all are the front door to the People's Department. We thank OPPE for your partnership and leadership in putting this together. And this conversation tonight, I know y'all are not just here for a really delicious meal. You actually want to hear about what you can do to support food security, the environment, and do that all through agricultural policy. And I also want to give a shout out to those of you who are joining online. Thank you for being here. I would love to talk to you all a little bit about what we're up to advance some of the efforts around climate change, nutrition security, equity. Who here cares about the climate crisis? Yeah. Who here is interested in what we're doing on things like food loss and waste? Yeah. Who thinks that we have a diet-related chronic disease crisis in this country? Who here is tracking issues with rural prosperity and equity challenges in rural areas, suburban areas, and urban areas alike? Who cares about affordable housing? Who cares about renewable energy? What about safe food and affordable food? Yeah, we do all of that here and so much more. And as mentioned, I've done a couple of things across the department over the past couple of years. I've worked in nearly half of the department, and now I get to work alongside thousands of scientists, economists, statisticians, national science leaders every single day, not just to make sure that our current system remains productive, but to really ensure that we're pushing the boundaries on innovation and breakthrough innovations that can support a more truly nourishing, a more inherently sustainable, and a more just and equitable food system. And we're working specifically to re-elevate science. Under this administration, we worked really hard to rebuild our scientific enterprise. And the REE mission area, the RE mission area that I oversee, is the scientific heart of the Department of Agriculture. We're a gigantic agency. We have agencies, we have offices, we need whole offices to coordinate all of our other offices. We're huge. We have 100,000 people plus across the country supporting all of the missions that I talked about. So I help oversee one of our 8 mission areas, REE, and we're advancing research development and in particular the deployment of solutions, because we know that doing research for the sake of research is not a good idea. We need to make sure that all of that knowledge, that information, those tools, that science gets into the hands of people who most need it, especially our farmers, but increasingly communities and really anybody who eats, which is every single one of us. So we know that all that we do will have a huge impact on our ability to tackle the intersecting challenges that I talked about: climate crisis, rising food and nutrition insecurity. What about emerging public health threats that we're all tracking? Global conflicts. So many issues, and every day we're propelling all of this work because we know that even though we understand the landscape today, we actually have quite a lot of challenge coming up right on the horizon. So by 2050, you all know the stat, we'll be at nearly 10 billion people on the planet. So roughly 2 billion more mouths to feed over 30 years. And doing so won't require a short amount of more food. We're actually going to need to produce 70% more food than we do right now. And that will take at least 30% more water and over 50% more energy. We're already pretty resource constrained right now, right, with how we produce our food. Agriculture, as you've heard, is globally responsible for at least 1/3 of emissions, but also is hugely impacted by climate change as well. Farmers are on the front line and a key part of driving solutions to our climate crisis. We simply cannot meet our Paris goals without addressing opportunities to drive innovation in agriculture and support especially small and mid-sized producers. And we do all of this while protecting natural resources, the environment, so conservation. I'm glad our state conservationist is here. We want to give opportunities for farmers and producers in those communities in which they live to prosper. Because I don't know if y'all know this, but farmers don't get a whole lot of the food dollar today. You can look at the Economic Research Service. They have a whole series on the food dollar. And what I'll share with you is that at least 84% of farmers in America today don't get their primary income from farming. They have to take off-farm income to feed their families. So we have a system over the past couple of years, we had record farm income, but when the secretary charged us to look at the data, we actually recognized that it was a really small percentage of producers that were really benefiting from that system. And it's a system that has really been created and entrenched over the past couple of decades with a huge shift in agricultural policy and starting in the 1970s, which really valued production and yield over everything else. And now we're really taking a hard look and figuring out how can we ensure that we're not just productive, but we're also incentivizing sustainability, nutrition, and equity in all that we're building. So there has been a huge effort the past couple of years under this administration, under the secretary's leadership, around food systems transformation. You can read about all of our various programs, more than 200, I think, just from some of the new efforts going on to support that work. I think that CAPAL and all of you have a huge opportunity to be a part of this. I know we have some USDA interns. Do we have any of our ARS interns here? Yes. All right. Thank you. I really think about your power to leverage creativity to develop breakthrough solutions like what I'm talking about. We actually just launched a brand new innovation challenge 2 weeks ago. The Secretary of Agriculture did, because we tend to fund climate science over here and nutrition science over here and support for equity initiatives over there. And we thought, well, gosh, you can't solve any of these issues in a vacuum. We actually need to think about solutions that think about these issues as a system. So if any of you here are watching online, if you're an early career researcher, so if you've received your PhD within the past 10 years, we encourage you, we invite you to get a team together and submit an application. We're going to be giving out up to $2 million through a breakthrough challenge that we've launched to fund the best and most promising, the coolest ideas that you have to tackle these intersecting challenges. I also know that you have so much influence in your communities, and I think the rising generation of leaders cares so much more about where your food comes from, who produces it, the impact on communities, and than even I did growing up. And so that influence around not just having safe food and available food, but making sure it's nutritious and culturally appropriate and is leading to wellness and health. Those are all things that you all are on the cutting edge of, and you have more clout with your communities and with the folks that listen to you than we ever will in government. So we're looking forward to partnering with you on some of that work as well. And I think what you all have to offer too, again, back to the conversation around science and innovation. Unfortunately, over time, our investments in our own and our public R&D. So for those of you who are not familiar, public investments in science through the military, through the Department of Defense, for example, it's the reason why we have the Foundation for the Internet, GPS, why we have cheap renewable energy today. A lot of these breakthroughs are funded by the federal government and then commercialized through partnerships with the private sector. We want to really advance that for food, for agriculture, for conservation here as well. But our public budgets for agricultural R&D have actually been declining over the past 30 years. So as all of these challenges get more and more complex, more and more scary, our resources to meet them are actually declining. So I want you all to kind of take a look at that. And if you value science, if you value public investments in these critical, essential programs, I encourage you to work with us to figure out how we can grow that work. So one of the things that I'm really excited about, so I have 4 science agencies within my mission area and the Office of the Chief Scientist. And we get to fund everything from lab and field to table. We're working on building a more circular bioeconomy. We're advancing nutrition. We're trying to figure out what crops we could be growing for maximum protein, so many different things. But one of the main things that we've been focused on is building the next generation of leaders the future leader, food, agriculture, nutrition, conservation, I mean, you name it, very broadly defined, leaders that look like America. And what we've done, and you all have seen it there, if you haven't taken a look or taken a picture with our next gen photo booth, sorry for those of you online, but it's beautiful and a representation of our commitment to, ooh, it's getting nice and we've got mood lighting in here. It's part of our commitment to making sure that we're building capacity and partnerships with minority serving institutions. So we believe that this is the biggest ever investment made by USDA just last year, over $250 million in more than 60 minority serving institutions across the country through our Next Gen program. And through Next Gen, we're able to provide paid, we knew how important paid is, paid scholarships, internships, experiential learning opportunities, networking, job matching, you name it, because we know that students that come from communities that don't often have exposure to these careers really need that first step. They need that exposure. They need somebody to help guide them and help them understand the tremendous opportunities in this sector. So I want to just share two quick examples. I'm curious, and I hope that there might be folks that are from these institutions, because we have one of our largest Next Gen grants, $20 million grant. We gave funding to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Hawaii Pacific University, the University of Guam, Arizona State University. Anybody from any of those institutions? All right, maybe online. And Food Corps. Together, they're going to work to train and empower 9,000 young people from underrepresented communities to advance food justice. And they're going to leverage role-playing simulations, experiential learning programs, and so many other tools to do that. This is directly at the intersection of agriculture and environmental justice. So one great example. Another one is a project from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Oklahoma State University, and Leeward Community College. We're also trying to broaden and expand our relationship with community colleges. So more than $7 million to train Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and American Indian students in biodiversity and biosecurity, and in integrating traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and perspectives into science and in our research and our practices. Two of many, many examples that we have in terms of how we're strengthening our relationships with AANHPI communities, and specifically how we're trying to build the next generation, again, of leaders that reflect the beautiful diversity of the communities that we serve, because we know that we can't deliver great programs, we can't meet the people that we need unless we have that lived experience here within the department. And this is really important to me. I know we have some interns. We actually, again, hosting about 18 interns. USC is proud to be one of the largest partners for CAPAL. We have folks in the Forest Service, and the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and then one of my agencies, the Agricultural Research Service. And I'm glad there's such a diversity of agencies represented, and I think we could do better, and I hope that we can do better. And I'll share with all of you that sitting with you tonight is something I never, ever would have possibly imagined. I got an internship, as Kenya nicely mentioned, at ARS kind of by accident a couple of years ago, just a couple of years ago. And I thought at that point I would become a foreign service officer, because I successfully got my mom off my back around being a doctor. She still tells me that she hopes I will change my mind. I see smiles in the audience. I think you all can relate. And I thought I would travel the world to go and support women, especially underserved women, in financial independence. And then I got this internship at USDA at ARS, and I was like, oh my goodness, there are so many challenges right here at home, and actually so much opportunity to build a more nourishing, a more sustainable, a more equitable food system through science and innovation. It's blown away. The fact that we fund all of this work on how to keep watermelons juicy and how to keep, plants growing in drought-like conditions, how to even grow, how to make products and bioproducts from agricultural waste. So creating a more circular bioeconomy, how to support rural economic development and bring, harness our natural assets to create jobs. I was just so overwhelmed by the opportunity here. And I am grateful that I have a chance now to be the deputy undersecretary, which is one level below Senate confirmed. I'm the youngest person ever appointed to my position. I'm the first Muslim American ever appointed to my role. And as a South Asian, I'm grateful to actually have had the example set by my father, who worked for EPA for more than 40 years, who set the tone around the power of public service. And I hope that all of you, as you explore your internships and you build relationships, not just with the agencies and the organizations that you're placed with, but with each other. Like, you really are a community, you really are a cohort. It's not that big of a world in DC, right, Kenya? We've known each other for a while, and people just kind of keep coming back around. You can really take advantage of that opportunity, and don't be afraid if you don't feel fully welcome and included. Because I will say, especially in the early days, working even right here in this building, I'll share when I moved into the secretary's office toward the end of the Obama administration, I remember the first staff meeting that we had with the secretary's senior advisors. And I looked around and I thought, oh, okay, I literally don't look like anybody at this table. Not only do I not look like them, I don't present like them. I'm not dressed like them. I don't have a similar background to them. And I thought to myself, okay, Sanah, you just need to be more like them. And, come in with your Ann Taylor suit, pull your hair back and your glasses and, just kind of fit the mold. And I tell you guys, I was physically ill in just a couple of weeks by trying to pretend to be somebody I was not, because I thought that would make me feel like I belonged. And instead, I decided to embrace my culture. I'm Indian and Pakistani. I literally showed up with my native clothing, and I brought food from home, and I would microwave it in the office. Really spicy Pakistani food, and nobody could miss that or ignore that. And I was a little bit afraid, like, what would people think? How would the reaction be? And again, this is a different time, early 2000s. But it was an opportunity to build connection and to open doors to conversation. And what that taught me was actually being myself and who I am is my greatest strength. And it opened a lot of curiosity. It helped me build deeper connections with colleagues who I didn't think I could really relate with. So I'll just say, I think hopefully culture, society has changed a little bit since that time, but unfortunately in some places and some organizations, it has not. So you all have an opportunity to maybe break the mold and set the tone and teach people how they need to treat you. Because I certainly don't want to be the last person of my demographic background in this role. I want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for all of you to keep rising much higher than I ever will, because it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that your creativity, your lived experiences, again, are represented in the billions of dollars, not only at USDA, but all of the federal agencies that we work with. So I know we were talking about food, ag, and the environment. I just want to say as well, we are close to, I don't know the exact numbers, but about 50% of USDA employees are at or near retirement age. So we have a lot of opportunities for all of you, if interested, to come and join us on a wide variety of program areas, agencies that you might be interested in. And as somebody who has been a staff assistant, a chief of staff, a special advisor, I've had every role that you can think of, and I've jumped in and out of the department. Think a little bit creatively about how you might leverage an opportunity in the public sector. I think this generation in particular is more creative and more willing to kind of have rotational opportunities. And I've really benefited from that personally, working in the public sector, jumping out, working on the nonprofit side, working with county elected officials. So I encourage you to think maybe differently than how you might expect a federal career or a career in public service to work. And I'm really excited for the chance to hear from our panel, who I think can cover kind of the diversity of pathways for you. And I just want to end with the fact that nothing truly gives me more hope than meeting with and hearing from all of you, because you are truly not afraid to speak truth to power. You're willing to do things radically differently than we've ever done in the past. You feel the urgency of the crises that I've outlined, and you are so motivated to act. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. I think if we have time for questions, I would love to take any, if you have them. Thank you again.
Hello, my name is
Uh,
Thong. I'm an intern with OCA, and I'm really interested in this section of Indigenous ecological knowledge that you were mentioning prior. And I'm curious if you can speak more to how that specific type of knowledge, which is so rich and oftentimes erased from institutions like these, how are you incorporating that now? And how do you envision the future for that so it continues to sustain and stay in this place?
Thank you for your question. It's something that actually I was just talking with the undersecretary about, because we've done quite a lot over the past 3.5 years under this administration to advance the priorities of our Indigenous partners and our First Nation partners. And so we have government to government consultations every year across all of our mission areas to really figure out what are their needs, how can we be responsive? And we heard loud and clear that we need to incorporate ITEC, Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, as a priority across our mission areas. So not thinking about it over here, but integrating it in all that we do. So a couple quick things. We've launched, I think, at least 6 new research partnerships on Indigenous research for agriculture. We have done some work on community engagement because we know, when I was talking about health outcomes and disparities, and when we look at demographics, we know that our First Nations, we know that our Indigenous communities have some of the most dire health outcomes and diet-related health outcomes. So we've been engaging with them through an initiative that we call Ascend for Better Health, which is part of our work on translating research into action, knowing that a lot of communities, especially tribal and rural communities, just don't know. There's so much information about health and nutrition and wellness. How do we meet them where they're at? And we've been partnering with our 1994s on that. Do you all know what 1994s are? There are land grant universities that are tribal, and they're called 1994s because that's when the year that the legislation passed to create that designation. So in addition to that, we're also strengthening our capacity building, because one of the issues that we see is that a lot of these universities, tribal colleges, universities, community colleges, they don't actually have a lot of the capacity needed to take on a multi-million-dollar research grant, for example. They have not done that before, right? So part of it, and they have not maybe been able to be as competitive as we would like them to be with all of the different folks that are eligible for some of our grant programs. So we've actually taken our scientists and our grant experts to them. We just hosted one of a workshop to help them understand, how do you apply for a research grant? How do you manage it? What are the reported, like some of the things that, again, they just haven't had an opportunity to build those muscles. So we're trying to also create the enabling environment for them to be more successful in carrying out their research. I would also encourage you all to take a look at our equity page. There's so much in there. The Office of Tribal Relations is incredible here at USDA, and they have launched a lot of work around tribal food sovereignty as well. And we've also we have a lot of partnerships, for example, to help propagate Indigenous seeds. We're very respectful and thoughtful around data partnerships and privacy, because that's a huge concern for our tribal partners. So there's quite a lot going on. I'll also say, kind of from a technocratic point of view, we made it clear that through NIFA, our largest extramural funding research agency, that traditional Indigenous ecological knowledge is very specifically eligible for our research grant funding. So those are a couple of examples. There's so much more on our website.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate that.
Anybody online? No? Okay, well, I'll make my way off the stage. Thank you very much. Great to meet you all. Enjoy the rest of your program.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nicholas and Undersecretary Baig, for taking the time to be here and for sharing your words of wisdom and inspiring some of our students, both virtually and here in the building here that are attending this session. It's so exciting to hear about all the work that USDA is doing in support of climate change, sustainability, equity, and nutrition. And also, I was very excited to hear about your work with the partnerships with the universities and working with Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and other indigenous peoples, and how that work is, and also inspiring some of our young people to look to public service as an opportunity for their future careers. So thank you so much. And so now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Kolby, who is our board chair, CAPAL board chair, and he will exchange places with our guests here to introduce our panel discussion for the next portion of our program. Thank you. One more chair.
Yes, go. Let's go. Okay, while we get the stage to reset, let us thank again the Deputy Undersecretary and the Deputy Director. It is such a privilege for CAPAL to be in this wonderful venue. I was telling the Deputy Undersecretary I get to walk by every day on my way to work, but I've never seen the beauty inside. CAPAL is truly thankful to USDA, all of our partners, for pulling this together. Today, we are talking about food security, sustainability, how those intersect with the AANHPI communities, but we're also talking about the road to public service, the choices people make on that road, and the different avenues. So this chair is here. I'm going to sit down. But folks, I'm Kolby. I'm the board chair for CAPAL. I've been volunteering for them for about 4 years. I'm a director at FGS Global, but most importantly, I'm your moderator tonight, and I'm thrilled to be with this panel. I think to kick things off, I'd like to just give our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. So we have Elaine, we have Mitch, we have Caitlin. Elaine, I'll start with you. Tell us who you are, and I think to the Deputy Undersecretary's point, like what was your journey into food security, food policy? Take it off.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you all for having me here. Very excited to be here. I have always loved food. I think that is where this journey begins. As a child, I loved eating food. I loved making food. I loved growing my own food. And I always thought that it would just be something that I would enjoy in my free time, not something that you could pursue as a career or focus on long term. Until I took my first food studies class in college, my mind was blown. I was like, wow, I wanted to throw my entire major away, but I couldn't. So I did a food studies minor and was able to learn about the intersections of food with just about every other aspect of life. And I left college knowing that I wanted to do something with food. Had no other direction, just knew food. I was like, maybe I'll become a chef. Maybe I don't know, work for a nonprofit. So I was very open to a lot of opportunities. And then COVID happened and I finished college, moved back home, was still trying to figure out how I wanted to find my place, the food system. And I started a small nonprofit at home in my year in between college and starting the Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellowship. So this was a fellowship through the Congressional Hunger Center. And it was just one of those things where it's like, as soon as you read the description online, I was like, I have to apply. Like, this is for me. It was a 1-year program where you spend the first 6 months with a nonprofit somewhere in America. They choose for you. And then the latter half of the year, you're in DC for your policy placement and you're learning about the policy approach to ending hunger and poverty. So whenever I go to a restaurant, if there is a flight of something or a sampler, I always order that because I like having as many flavors and experiences as possible. And so this experience was really calling to me because I was able to get nonprofit experience and policy experience within 1 year. And this was really helpful for me as a chronically indecisive person to figure out how I can fit into how I can fit food into my career and how I can fit into the realm of food security. And so I was in upstate New York in Syracuse for 6 months with a small nonprofit and worked on a storytelling program. And then I was in DC with the Intertribal Agriculture Council supporting their work with the Native Farm Bill Coalition. And during my time in DC, this was 2023, when there was a lot of talk about the 2023 Farm Bill reauthorization, which is a large omnibus piece of legislation that happens every 5 years. And, it does a lot of things in regards to farm policy, but also SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is funded through the Farm Bill. And so I had heard a lot about the Farm Bill, and after I finished my fellowship, there was an opportunity with the House Agriculture Committee, and I started there. Actually, Caitlin showed me around on my first day. Caitlin was a very helpful resource when I first started off with the House Agriculture Committee. And I am currently a policy analyst with the House Agriculture Committee. I lead the urban ag and local foods portfolio, but I also work on nutrition, international food aid, food waste, and a few other things.
That's phenomenal. So not only are you a fellow foodie, and we have some great foodies in the AANHPI community, let's be honest, but you're really a true early adopter of like food policy interests. I love to hear it. And then I also realized, this is a quick fact, that you all kind of know each other, which perhaps shouldn't surprise me. That it just shows like how small this community is. But you all met and you two also worked with each other. Okay, we're gonna keep digging into it, but Mitch, take it away.
Everyone, Mitch Heidenreich, originally from Hawaii, went to college in Oregon, not knowing at all what I wanted to do. Kind of like politics in high school. Worked my first campaign as a sophomore in college, absolutely hated it. Switched my major to communications, ended up being a communications major with a history double. After college, couldn't find a job, just kind of bumming around in Oregon for 3.5 months, being a bum, hiking. Blew through my savings, moved back home with my mom, figured got to get my stuff together. Ended up working at a market research firm in Hawaii. And Congressman Case had volunteered on some of his previous campaigns that he didn't win. But in 2018, he won a primary and he asked me, hey, do you want to come up to DC? Can you move to DC in 2 weeks? And this was late December, so moving in the middle of winter. And I'm like, sure, sounds great. Came to DC. He asked me, do you want to work on policy issues? I said, sure, looked at the list, picked agriculture. My family has been involved in agriculture in Hawaii for generations. Part of the reason that I'm American is that my great-grandfather immigrated from Japan to support the sugar industry. My grandfather worked in the sugar industry, retired as the mill manager in Hilo, and something my mom's worked her entire career, so I figured it'd be a good way to give back to an industry that's given so much to my family. And just kind of ran with it from there. I was with Congressman Case for 3.5 years, picked up additional issues, including environmental issues and oceans along the way. Tried my hand at lobbying for a little bit, wasn't my forte, and then came back to work for Representative Tokuda, member of the Ag Committee during a Farm Bill year, as Elaine mentioned, and figured to be a really rewarding experience, and it has been.
And a great member to work for. So I would say perhaps if we stipulate a food policy convert, but would you say it's in the family blood?
For sure.
All right, Caitlin.
Hi, y'all. I'm Caitlin. I currently serve as a special advisor in the Office of the Secretary, so literally upstairs in that scary office that was talked about before. Before that, I worked on Capitol Hill with Elaine for the U.S. House Agriculture Committee. And before that, I worked in New York City and New York State food policy. I'm from New York. And how I got into this was I wanted to be a psychologist in college, and obviously I'm not. I literally was mutual friends with someone on Facebook who was posting interesting things about food policy in New York. And I messaged her and I said, what is this? What are you doing? And she offered to meet up with me outside of Brooklyn Borough Hall, which is where she worked. And we got coffee, and that day she offered me an internship for their office. And I just haven't turned back from food policy since then. So if anything, I hope you can gain from that. Just cold message the person who's doing something interesting. But yeah.
The power of social media as well to send you down an algorithm to take you to food policy land. That's wonderful. Well, panelists, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I think today we're covering, I think, the intersection of food security policy, the AANHPI community, those obstacles, but also intertwined, like how you found your public service journey in that space, right? And so let's start with Caitlin, and I'm interested in, you know, here at USDA, through the committee work that you do, Elaine, in the personal office that you work at, the policies that you're interacting with, the communities you're interacting with, what are maybe like one or two issues that you most care about that I think this crowd should know that intersects with the community work that we're talking about?
I think this goes back to what Sanah and Kenya were saying earlier. Kenya was saying this phrase of like how to bring the sexy back to agriculture. And okay, who here has taken a picture of their food before? Okay, if you're not raising your hand, you're lying. But like we already think food is sexy. We love food. We love to show it to other people. We love to talk about it. We love to plan our travel and our life around it. I do at least in some part. Okay, but now I'm gonna switch to the part of being that person at the party who makes like a fun, silly topic really serious. So at the same time in which food is really fun and fun to look at and we crave it, food is also a really serious topic. It has really serious implications on human health and nutrition, on diet-related disease, on the environment, how we use our land, water, and air. It has serious implications on workers and people who make and process and harvest our food, on equity issues from environmental justice to health disparities to animal welfare. And I say all that to say, like, I feel like no matter what you're interested in, there's something that probably overlaps with the food system. And going back to what Sanah was saying, like if any of these have any interest to you, USDA has a possible place for you. Yeah, I'll pass it to Mitch or Elaine.
I think the big thing for me has been data disaggregation. Too often Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders are listed as other. As my boss likes to say, you have, data for African Americans, for Latino Americans, for other communities, and then there's other. And, coming from the Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community, there's so many diverse sets of communities within that. And having accurate data in terms of the issues impacting the various sorts of communities, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country, in Hawaii or Alaska, or even, Compact Free Association residents in the United States, it's so critical and important. And the administration has been making great steps towards gathering that data, but I think having that baseline to evaluate policy on and to have informed policy for the community is just so critical.
For me personally, it's really important to make sure that we are maintaining our cultural foodways and making sure that that we are expanding and maintaining access to culturally relevant foods. I'm not sure how long y'all have been in DC, but I'm sure you've noticed it's kind of hard to get, some of the foods that you're used to around here, right? We don't have a large Asian supermarket. And from a policy standpoint, working on SNAP, it's really important that we maintain SNAP choice, which is, the ability to be able to purchase foods of your choice. A lot of times for us, it's culturally relevant foods, and making sure that the retail outlets that you shop at are able to accept SNAP benefits. And I think this is really important, not just for folks that use SNAP, but also just for any person that wants to be able to access a wider variety of groceries on their day-to-day.
Doing some, I think, future casting here and connecting back to what the Deputy Undersecretary was saying, by 2050, we need 70% more food, 30% more water, 50% more energy. What are you running into in the policy circles, or what are some of the conversations you're having? Like, this is what I'm most worried about, and these are some of the steps that we should be taking now in order to get ready for that obstacle.
I can get us started. So I think an inevitable consequence of the impacts of climate change means that we will be growing more food in less space. And there will be a rise in controlled environment agriculture and urban agriculture, and this will really change the ways that we access food and grow food. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to reshape food systems and make sure that folks are able to receive food a little more locally. I know USDA does a lot of great work in terms of urban agriculture, and I think in terms of policy conversations, we've been figuring out what are ways that we can tweak this program to make sure that we are being able to reach underserved producers. You know, what are ways that we can make this program more effective for all Americans?
It's great. And I think to Elaine's point, we need to think more long-term. I think we're really at a crossroads right now. Do we continue agriculture as usual, or do we look to invest in efficiencies, in new technologies to make ag, work for everybody, to make sure that we're reaching communities throughout the United States and the world for that matter. And with the Farm Bill being a 5-year cycle, I think, trying to think long-term, how do we get out of that and truly work on those bipartisan investments to address these challenges that we know are coming down the road with, what's happening in our aquifers, what's happening with wildfires, with other natural disasters that are impacting, crop insurance and other things in our rural communities.
Yeah. A little bit of a follow-up question, for any of you. The Deputy Undersecretary mentioned how this generation has a lot of clout, has a lot of power, has a lot of influence, has access to technology and more knowledge and fluidity with technology than previous generations. So how do we harness those tools and harness that type of expertise to positively influence the conversation around food security and food justice in our communities? It's a layup question. I'm just gonna.
I think don't underestimate the power of an individual. I think from just me living my life in the way that I want to live, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say like, wow, I've done XYZ because of you. Like this is very unrelated, but for 12 years, I did not cut my hair. It was almost down to my ankles. And one day I had someone approach me and was like, because of you, I decided to get like purple braids in my hair. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Cause I was just living my life. I was just doing what I wanted to do. But I think if you do what you want to do, and if it's not hurting anyone and you're passionate about it and you talk about it, change will be a natural consequence of that. I think people are drawn to passion. I think people want to make their communities better and be involved. And I think the more that you do things that matter to you and the more that you talk about them, you will naturally inspire change. And I think every single one of us here is more than capable of doing that.
So something I'm thinking of when you ask me that question is, I think when a lot of people think about food, agriculture, the environment, they think of like people toiling with their hands and like it's a technology-less field, but that's so far from the truth. Like Kenya was mentioning drones, like that's real. She's not just saying drones for the sake of saying the word. Just like technology is really important to getting to the food future that we want. So I would just say, like, don't think that agriculture seems like some far away rural topic that there's in which innovation isn't happening. It is.
Okay. Bringing this back and centering it in identity. How do you bridge, our AANHPI identities with the work that you currently do? Why is that important? How has it shown up for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's, really having a seat at the table, having conversations, educating folks up here, As somebody who grew up in Hawaii, I'm not Native Hawaiian, but have a lot of Native Hawaiian friends. The trust relationship the United States government has with Native Hawaiians is different than that with the tribes, different with that of Alaska Natives. And if it isn't for myself or my colleagues in the room having those conversations, advocating on that behalf, there's nobody having those conversations. So I think it highlights the importance of coming from the community, being on the Hill, being in these rooms, to bring that perspective and that background that's so important to make sure that we're not being left behind.
I'll share like two buckets of things I'm thinking about. On the internal side, like being part of the AANHPI community and being in public service, like when I just see this room right now, like that brings me so much joy. It's not every day that I see a room that looks like that. And that makes me really happy to see you all here. And at work, it's nice to see people that look like you, like Sanah was saying. And it like motivates me. And just on the external side, which maybe has an even bigger impact, like people who, and this alludes to what you were saying, people who look like and reflect the people that we are serving, having those people inside of government make decisions that impact them is really important. Like, here's a very simple example. USDA, as does every other federal department, puts out a gazillion resources, whether that's a document on how someone can apply for SNAP benefits or how someone can access a farm loan program. Something so simple that having people who are thinking with this equity lens is like, do you have those documents and resources in a language that they can actually understand? Like, this is something so basic, but if we don't have people who are having that framework in this place, then we can't reach those people and help them.
I'm always cautious, I think, particularly with our interns who are at different agencies and nonprofits, and they're kind of figuring out, where they'd like to be, the type of work they want to do. And we tend, as we should, to talk up opportunities in public service and the ways we show up and engage in the workplace. But sometimes we run into those challenges and obstacles at the workplace, right? Whether it's because it's a mesh of identity, whether it's because it's a different work style. So I'm curious if a few of you or some of you could talk about maybe an obstacle or conflict that you've seen shown up at work and in the workplace, and like how you've navigated that. Elaine?
Sure. So there are two specific things that I want to talk about. The first is that, growing up, my parents always told me, like, work hard and you'll be recognized. Like, don't make too big of a splash, like just do enough to like keep swimming and you'll naturally be swimming upwards. I realized that in the professional work sphere, even if you're doing amazing work, sometimes the folks that are in charge of recognizing your work and helping you move upwards, sometimes you really have to let them know, like, hey, I'm doing this amazing work. So you really have to advocate for yourself more than expected. And I think no one will ever be annoyed at you for advocating for yourself. Everyone can understand that you want to do more, that you want to further your career and continue learning. But I was just shocked by the amount of personal advocacy that I had to do, because it's a little uncomfortable. I think growing up, it kind of feels like I'm like bragging or pointing out things that, that I normally wouldn't want to do. And another experience that I have had is just with different cultural norms. And I think this happened maybe like when I first started college and also in both personal and professional experiences thereafter. But I don't know about you, but I like to finish my sentences uninterrupted. And I've noticed that sometimes in conversations, I'm like, I've just been interrupted. And in my head, I'm like, I've just been disrespected. Because growing up in my home culture, you really don't interrupt people. You let them finish and then maybe you say your piece. And so it took a little bit of mental gymnastics and learning and patience for me to realize that that is not the intention of the person that interrupted me. These are different speech patterns that other people have grown up with, and sometimes they're also in our professional spaces. And so realizing that people have good intentions, there's no harm intended, and that I will have to sometimes adapt to these situations and figure out how can I finish the rest of my sentence. You know, these are small learning curves and bumps along the road that I'm sure many of y'all have already experienced and may continue to experience in the future. But it's small things like that where you're like, wow, I think I'm kind of in a slightly different cultural zone here, and it takes a little bit of navigating and getting used to.
Thanks, Elaine. I think those are two phenomenal points to impart to our audience, right? The soft skills of like adapting to an office. Like so many of you, right, have either some of your education experience like was during like peak COVID, right? So you're not around that university setting, you like don't have that piece. And so when you go in an office, people are like, okay, figure it out. That's hard, right? It's hard to figure that out. And so, but having the patience, having an adaptable, a learning mindset is important. But I really appreciate the first point you brought up, which is the self-advocacy piece, because many, I think, in the AANHPI like background and culture in our families, like we're not socialized that way, right? We're not socialized. We're expecting to, I think, do the right thing, follow the rules, wait our time, wait for our place. And that's not always how it works in the workplace. So being able to cultivate our advocacy voice is so important. And the way to do that often is to practice in a safe space, like with colleagues, with peers, with CAPAL, with your mentor. I think great pieces of advice. I want to open it to the rest of the panel about challenges or obstacles you might have faced and like how you navigated that.
I would just say Elaine hit the nail on the head. I think it comes to being your own self-advocate is so important. Like in my career, I've been passed up for promotions and, talking to my manager about, hey, why didn't I get this? And like, oh, well, we didn't feel you're ready. And it's like, well, I've done all these things. And I'm like, oh, really? You did? You did that? And it's like, yes, I did. So it's like, I think it's hard to see, but like, being your own advocate, having those conversations with your boss, setting those expectations with them is so important to move in your career. And then I think secondly, like not attributing motives to folks. There have been times where, people are working on legislation that touches the community and it's done in a way that wouldn't necessarily help the community or done in a way that's kind of sloppy. And if it was any other legislation, it'd be like, oh, they made a mistake. But because it's something that, I'm so close to and passionate about, it's like, ready to go and have a fight with this office that's trying to do the right thing. It's just, they were misguided with something or just, made a mistake. So I think it's taking a step back, calming down, and then, trying to work with folks that are, willing to be allies and focus on the education rather than attributing that motive instantly.
Yeah, not assigning motive, assuming good intent, and speaking up for yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll give some advice that I think might be helpful for people interested in public service broadly. I think something I've always been shocked about each time I changed jobs in public service was how clueless I was, just how much I didn't know. And even at USDA, like each day, I learn new acronyms and I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, I'm sure Sanah or Kenya, or maybe I said some acronyms that you were like, what? But I think I'm saying this with the notion of an opportunity. Like, especially early in your career, your job isn't only for you to contribute, like you can also learn, like be a sponge, be a learner, ask hard questions, find allies in the places you work that people are gonna like want to support you and help you grow. I think finding those people inside is really helpful.
Awesome. So we are coming up to the audience question period. So I hope you all have some questions for us. I want you to think about them right now. I know Hannah is tracking any questions that might be coming online. While that happens, I kind of want to take the panel and like kind of ask some specific questions. First, I'll start with Elaine. You've been on the nonprofit side of things. You played a leading role or founded a nonprofit, and you're now on the government side of things for a committee. What were the key differences between there when people are thinking about kind of how to choose their public service journey?
That's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, I don't have an answer that fits every single one of your scenarios here. I think a lot of it is dependent upon your interests. It varies from nonprofit to nonprofit, small nonprofit versus large nonprofit. Small nonprofits, you'll be spending a lot of time trying to get grants and funding, and you do amazing work and you're very tied to the community. Larger nonprofits, you're maybe a little more separated, a little less boots on the ground, but you're able to have a much larger reach. And so think about what type of impact you'd like to make. Think about what your ideal community or population that you work with looks like. And in terms of, comparing the private and public and governmental sector, I honestly think that the public sector feels pretty similar to the nonprofit sector in a lot of ways. I think folks are very friendly and accommodating. Of course, Capitol Hill is its own beast. I'm sure it's very different from USDA or any other agency, but I think try it out. Do an internship somewhere. That's probably the best way to figure out what you actually want to do. And during your internship, make sure that you network and you have coffee with folks. I've realized people love to be helpful. If you go up to a stranger and get to know them and tell them like, I'm interested in XYZ, do you know anyone that does these things? Most of the time, they will connect you to someone who can share their insights about those specific topics that you're interested in. So just always be on the lookout for new opportunities and don't be afraid to, like Caitlin did, just cold reach out to people. People like to be helpful.
Here, here. All right, let's open it up for questions. Yes, in the audience, I think I can run a mic to you. Hannah will run a mic to you.
Hello? Oh,
Go ahead and introduce yourself too.
hello. My name is Farina. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out speaking to us. All of your remarks have been so insightful. This is referencing something that Elaine was speaking about, but you very happy to hear you touch on it. I appreciate, Elaine, your comments on culturally relevant food, especially this is my first couple weeks living in DC for the first time, but something I've immediately noticed, and a lot of the people I've been meeting have noticed, also living in DC for the first time, is the lack of ethnic foods, culturally relevant foods in the city. And I guess something that I'm just very curious to hear your answer about is do you think there's what do you think is the reason behind that, or is there an analysis, a justification that you have or you've heard about? And also I'd be curious to hear if the USDA is doing any work related to that as well.
That is an excellent question. I'll probably pass this over to Caitlin in just a second. And I am no historian, but I believe that is due to gentrification and, pushing people out of Chinatown. And I mean, you can find Asian supermarkets. They're just 35 minutes south in Annandale or 35 minutes north in Rockville. And so I think there are larger societal issues that play into that. And as for USDA efforts to potentially bring an Asian supermarket closer, I personally don't know, but maybe Caitlin can shed some light.
I can just speak to how USDA is thinking about these culture appropriate foods. The first thing I'll think of is, and this is what Sanah was alluding to actually with the tribal food sovereignty. So for instance, how are we allowing people who somewhat rely on USDA programs to access foods that are culturally appropriate to them? And another topic I'll bring up is school meals. So for instance, I worked in New York City food policy where there are people of all different kinds. And we have to think about how are we going to serve these 1 million+ kids a day in which they're going to get food affordably and actually consume it and have a nutritious meal, ensure that it's climate friendly, ensure that the producers that we're getting from is serving people equitably, et cetera. But something USDA especially has been thinking about under this administration is, for instance, how are we having kosher and halal meals available for people? Those are just some of the examples.
Thank you for tag teaming that question. And the PSA is there's some excellent Asian food in Annandale, Falls Church. There's an excellent pho shop in Rossland, accessible by the metro, affordable, what we would find in our kind of community, because that's where the communities live around this area. All right, other questions? Let's go, Mark.
before we go to our next in-person question, you'll see that we'll be handing out some surveys to our in-person audience members. Your feedback is very important in helping to keep programs like tonight's running year after year. For our virtual attendees, we will be dropping the link in the chat box. And before we get to your question, I did want to field one question from our virtual audience. So this question is from Cooper Solomon. He is a CAPAL intern. He is working at the U.S. Forest Service this summer. And he asks, on Oahu, many of the indigenous food systems are suffering heavily due to the introduction of invasive species, among many other unrelenting issues. Because of this, many projects and efforts I work on related to indigenous food system restoration and food sovereignty often get referred to as a lost cause. Unfortunately, this trend is not unique to Hawaii. Do you have any words of advice for those of us feeling the weight of witnessing our invaluable indigenous food systems being lost in so many places?
That's a fantastic question. I think, especially with coconut rhinoceros beetle coming to Hawaii and that taking, attacking taro. It's a major staple crop in the Native Hawaiian community. It's awful. I think it's a multi-pronged approach from USDA, looking at aphis. What can we do to stop more invasives from coming into the United States, from spreading within the United States? If you leave Hawaii, there is a scan of your luggage for agricultural goods to keep fruit flies out of California, out of Florida. When you go into Hawaii, there's nothing. So it's, whenever for Congressman Case, he introduced a bill to have that same pre-clearance done going into Hawaii. It also, I think, highlights the need for additional resources from both NIFA and ARS into traditional and indigenous crops. It's something that, when you look at the food systems, it's really set up for commodities. And then you have the big umbrella specialty crops, which are thousands of crops. But, specifically as it relates to indigenous crops, like there isn't even a definition of that. So it's like, what can we do to both invest in the research side of things, but also help those indigenous producers navigate, the USDA bureaucracy. And my boss has, worked on a number of initiatives, but it's, something that we'll continue to take a holistic approach to and work together on.
And Mitch, you're the right person to answer that question. So glad you're on this panel. And hello to Cooper in California. He's one of my mentees for this. And Cooper, we're going to connect you with Keegan in the front row here about pathway programs at USDA. All right, I think we're going to be over to Mark for the next question.
Hello, my name is Mark. I'm also an intern at OCA. My question is sort of related to the previous one, but something that really interests me is the way that food has been weaponized throughout history as a means of disenfranchising colonizing communities. We see how foods like spam, sugarcane, pineapples have been used across Asia and the Pacific in particular to make our communities dependent on the U.S. military and U.S. industry. And we see those effects to this day. I'm Korean American, and in my community, we're still very dependent on foods like spam, and it's become part of our culture, but it's still a continuing reminder of our military histories. So my question is, how does your work kind of come into conflict with other agendas in the U.S. government to this day, whether that be military or industry-based? And how does your identity as AANHPIs inform the ways you do these histories justice?
That's a really great question. It's a hard question. My boss serves both on House Armed Services and on House Agriculture, and food security, being national security, is so important. In Hawaii, we import upwards of 85% of our food, and like localizing those supply chains, having that investment from the federal government is so important to staying in Hawaii if there was, God forbid, a war in the Pacific. But I think, as it relates to that contradiction, I think it's hard. We talked about traditional ecological knowledge for Lo'ikalo, for taro patches, for fish ponds, trying to promote that, working with the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs that's chaired by Senator Schatz. We've looked to do, a lot in terms of changing the conversation, educating folks. I think the education bit's been so important in terms of, what are, crops or foods eaten by the community. But I think it's an ongoing conversation. I think just underscores the importance of having folks in the community that are part of that conversation.
I hesitated to answer so quickly because I feel like that's a really hard question. So thank you for your question, Mark. Um, I'll go back to what I was saying before of I think that like this is part of what's really important of like listening to people who are doing this work on the ground, which I think is also what you were saying of like listening to people and bringing people in the conversation. And this just goes back to the like why is having AANHPI representation important? And for instance, when I was talking about how I worked on New York City school meals, like I was the only person in that office who worked on that food policy team who was not white. And I feel like I was thinking of things of like, okay, what do like, for instance, like the Asian community loves to have like tofu or something, which is a really nutritious, healthy, sustainable food. But like, how are we providing that to the people who are actually consuming those meals? So I don't really have the answer to your question, but I think part of that, part of getting closer to that is talking about the things we're saying now.
And to your point, being at the table and being part of that policy or decision-making process like the three of you are doing. Next question.
Hello, it's Fong again from OCA. This question is for Caitlin. And I'm really fascinated by your prior mentioning of the significance of technology and how it coincides with agriculture and why we should be focusing on that association a little bit more. I go to school in the Bay Area, so a lot of what I'm thinking about is the influx and infiltration of artificial intelligence and how, while helpful, can also be very damaging to our communities. And so I'm curious if you could answer this question or anyone else in the panel about what is the reality of that introduction into the agricultural sector right now? How is the USDA dealing with this exponential rise in the utilization of artificial intelligence or any other means of digital technology that we think might be useful for this sector?
Well, I don't feel smart enough to address the AI part of your question. If you want to connect after, maybe I can find out more and help you get an answer. But on the technology part more broadly, one thing I'll say is I think that USDA is not just thinking about how do we use technology to innovate and produce more, but how do we do that in an equitable way? And part of what Sanah was saying, for instance, of how USDA supports institutions that touch different marginalized communities, like collaborating with them. It's not just like, how are we collaborating with the biggest partners who already have access to that technology or who can access it on their own, but how are we giving to that to the communities who can maybe use it in a creative way, or maybe who wouldn't be able to access it otherwise. So not just giving it out, but giving out in a way that is thoughtful.
And to add to that, just yesterday, I was touring a wheat farm in Maryland, and the farmer there multiple times mentioned just how much they like the addition of technology to their growing operations, how it's made them more efficient, how they're able to make sure that, when they're planting things in a row, that it's accurate, when, they're driving their tractors around and harvesting, that it's going in an exactly straight line. And it's also been beneficial in terms of like agriculture research as well. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for technology to really further us with agriculture. And as I mentioned before, growing more food in less space, it's important to be, as efficient as possible, not only, for the environment, but also, you know, wasting seed and wasting other inputs on the farm is not necessarily the best stewardship of money and time.
Thanks, Hong. Any other audience questions or questions online?
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm working with the USDA Arts. And I have a question really more on community engagement. So how can we engage the AANHPI community to be more involved in creating a resilient and equitable food system at more of a local level that's not really looking at the research or policy type of involvement?
I feel like the Hill person should maybe, the member of Congress person should maybe answer.
Well, that is a great question because I wonder that too. I actively think about that because it is important because on the Hill, we have stakeholder meetings, and a lot of times these are rather large organizations that come in and they're like, this is wrong, please fix this, give us more money for this specific program. And it's very rare that we're able to hear directly from people who are the most involved with the food system, or that are maybe a few steps away from where from those large organizations that come and talk to us on the Hill. I think from a very personal standpoint, the solution begins, and I know I've already kind of said this before, but begins with yourself. How are you engaging with the food system? Where are you choosing to shop for your produce? What are you buying? What are you cooking? And like Deputy Undersecretary Baig said earlier, like how I it's like a bad way to say it, but like how proud are you of your food heritage, or what are you microwaving in the work microwave, right? I think being able to show up to spaces as your authentic self with your cultural food, with your cultural dress, that is a good starting point. At the most, I guess, like that's really the tip of the pyramid. And from there, once again, like Deputy Undersecretary Baig said, you'll meet people who are like-minded, and you'll be able to open up conversations with folks that may not share the same experiences as you, but they'll be receptive and interested in your stories. And from there, I think, it's kind of a trickle-down effect. And of course, there are other ways I think it's just important for everyone to find community, find where they belong. Sometimes that's with food, or it could also be like find a community garden near you, volunteer at a local food bank. Maybe there's folks there that speak your native language, and maybe you're able to assist with translating there. So there's a lot of small ways to plug into the food system that may seem small, but I think that's important because the best action is the action that you'll actually do, right? And it's really hard to make other people do things. It's a little easier to make yourself do things and hold yourself accountable.
I love that. So bringing your authentic self and bringing our food into communities, bringing our lived experiences into our places of work, I think is a really nice place to, I think, wrap today. I know there are a few questions left. I want you to connect with our panelists. They're going to be here for at least the next 30 minutes. I want to go back to where we started, which was kind of laying down a challenge, right? Again, this reality that by 2050, 70% more food, 30% more water, 50% more energy is needed, right, to support our planet. And so I'm so thankful to have the three of you working in this space and kind of leading that journey for us, but also bringing the kind of AANHPI like intersectionality to that, and ensuring that like our communities are centered in that challenge. So let us thank this panel of wonderful people today for their contributions. Thank you for being with us. Let us thank USDA, our wonderful hosts, for welcoming us into their space and home. And I thank everyone for joining us today. Denise is going to bring us home.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Kolby. And thank you to Caitlin and to Mitch, Elaine, and also, I don't know if Kenya's still here, and I thank you, the Undersecretary, for taking the time to be here tonight. We really appreciate everybody being here, those joining virtually and those who are able to make it here in DC tonight. If you enjoyed this WLP session, we have 4 more to go this summer. So our next one is actually on the 10th of July, and it'll be on economics in the AANHPI community. And we'll cover topics about economic disparities within the AANHPI community, as well as navigating the various career pathways and sectors within public service. You can register for the next program and all the other programs on our website, capal.org, and view all of our upcoming events. Follow us on social media, more about our S&I programs and also our partner programs that we offer during the summer. And thank you to our 2024 sponsors, especially the USDA, of course, for their continued support of our programs and continuing to provide opportunities for AANHPI in public service. To our panelists, please stay for a little while for a photo. We're going to take a group photo of the panel discussion. And thank you for those who joined us virtually. We'll conclude our program for our virtual part. And thank you all for joining for us, and hope to see you all come back for the next session of WLP. Okay, good night. And we'll open up for here. We'll be able to network with our panelists here and amongst each other. Thank you so much.